The new portal is up. It is running. Um, of course, with anything new, you got to learn how to use it. I'm more than willing to let you guys come back there and take a look at it, but I have not figured out how to print off um, each officer's trainings. They've got it where they may have a 2020 training and then all of a sudden a 2016 or 2017. So there's no basis for just having your 2020s in there. Um, of course, I'll have to look at and figure out. It's supposed to be an easier system. We'll see how that goes once we figure all that out. But it is up. They do have it running now. We were able to start putting training in last week or the week before. So we haven't put any of our 2021 training in there yet. But if you guys are interested in coming taking a look at that, you know, you definitely can come back there and I can log on to it and then kind of show you the way it looks and everything. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Update on resource sharing with Hotchkiss. I have not had any issues with our guys over there. I've not heard of anything negative. Not heard that they're doing anything. I do have an officer that lives there now. He was unable to find a house in Paonia, and so we actually had to extend our preference on how far they live in town, which is kind of a bummer because it'll be a longer response time. But at the same time, he had to leave, he had to move. He came up to me and asked me, I've got this opportunity to get a house in Hotchkiss. I said, get it, you know, go ahead. And he'll still be on calls. It'll just take an extra 5-10 minutes for him to get into town. Just so you know, if you ever see anybody racing into town with their lights and sirens or anything, that's what that is. The contract is a recurring contract. It's every month it'll go up. Whenever we first signed the contract, it was for 30 to 45 days. I believe we're going into 30 some days now. So we are trying to get some sort of a clarification. We've made a call to see if there is any kind of end date or anything like that, and we haven't gotten a response back yet at this time. Vehicle is on the road. It's out there if you guys want to go and take a look at it. My guy comes on at 10 o'clock, the one that's driving it. So he should be out there if you guys want to go and see it whenever you guys get done. I'll have him stay by. The cage is not put in yet. We want to give it a week, 2 weeks, make sure everything's copacetic and not going to electrocute anything. Once the cage gets put in it, then it'll go back in the shop for another day and a half. I've got to put the gun lock that attaches to the cage and a couple of speakers that attach to the cage. So the only thing left is a couple of things that attach to the cage. So that'll be done. He got it last Thursday was whenever he started driving it. So we are good with that. I got my car back, so we're all good with all of our cars now. We are going to have an issue with our extra car, the Crown Vic that we got. Potentially deciding if we're going to do some repairs on it. The number 8 cylinder is filling up with oil, so it's going to be take the whole top part of the engine off and fix it, or if we're just going to let it go, it's probably going to be about a $1,500 to $2,000 fix, which we have if we want to fix it, but it's also an older car. Do we want to put the money into it?
Yeah, what year is that?
A 2007.
2007. Yeah.
And we got it free from Littleton PD. They donated it to us about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And we haven't had to do anything to it, so, but it's the only other one that has lights and sirens and
Right.
is equipped at this point in time as an extra vehicle for us. So it might be beneficial to go ahead and do the repairs. So we're going to look into that and get a cost and figure out how much that'll cost to do it. Political signs. I haven't seen any other political signs. The signs that I think that we're talking about are the one signs out there. There is nothing can be done. Mesa County is also going through the same issue up in Orchard City. They had a person put F Biden and everything on there. Their attorney says the same thing as our attorney, that it is free speech. The word, or the F word, is protected per case law, unless it is going to incite a riot or going to create some sort of not even a nuisance, a cause for bodily injury. So other than that, there's nothing there. It is protected. There's nothing that we can do about it.
And also on that same note, it also, the case law determination is even if a municipal government has a sign ordinance stating that it's not allowed, that's not enforceable because it infringes on your constitutional rights. And as a municipal government, we don't have the ability to do that, of course.
And this one was the one in Orchard City. It was kind of the same thing. It was across the street from the school. And so that's, yep, it was pretty much the, I mean, it was almost like looking into a mirror whenever I saw this article, it was almost the same things. And their attorney said the same thing that our attorney said. So at this point in time, unfortunately, it's just, it is what it is. And it's we have no backing or anything to do anything with that.
Of course, we do have that other one on Clark Street too, which is really worse than the one on Delta, I think, because that does have the FU fighting. Oh, maybe that's it, Colorado.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I was gonna
Lockdown
say,
for
I
me.
hadn't seen the other one on Clark either.
No, I think that's it, Colorado.
Yeah,
Yes,
but, yeah, cause it's their private property and it's
Yep.
protected, yeah, there's nothing that can be done.
Yeah.
Resolutions, for the municipal code, I have not even gotten into those, at this point in time. I have to get with the attorney, we'll go through those, and figure out where we're gonna go with that, hopefully. I'm gonna say fall would probably be a more realistic time whenever we'll get that in front of you guys and have that going and everything. That'll give us time to meet with the attorney, give us time to meet with the judge. And then we'd give it to you guys for review and everything else. So I'm thinking fall with spring, and of course, summer coming up. All of the festivals are gonna still, or are scheduled to be going and everything at this point in time. So I have a feeling we're gonna go back to our nice, busy days and everything. There was a couple other things that we had talked about prior to, your list here, animal control. I'm still looking at a couple options. We did end up getting in touch with, the one that we had talked to before. They gave us the quote and everything. That's just probably not gonna work out. We asked them again. We had a year's worth of data on how many animals we would be, could have used it for. Came out to about 10 or 12 dogs over the year that we were able to, house or not find an owner for or something. At the time, whenever we got the first bid, it was $5 a day. Now they're asking for 15. So we're looking into other avenues. We're gonna look at Best Friends. They have, that's in Cedar Ridge. They have a board of directors that we'll talk to, that my sergeant's looking into. He's gonna be talking to them here shortly. And then also Delta's new one, that they opened up. I'm gonna see if there's any way that we may, if we ever need it, come back and configure back off of them and then, pay for the fees and everything that we need to associated with that. So I think it would be in our best interest if in the next couple of months, get this one taken care of, take out that shall and put in the, like we had discussed, in our town ordinance. And go ahead and I'll talk to Bo and let him know that I think that's kind of the way that I think that we should do it. That making sure that we have to, if somebody, or if there's a dog bite, we can quarantine at their house like we've done, for the last couple of months. If there is a dog bite, they're supposed to be quarantined for 10 days. If we take that out, then we can go ahead and make sure that they are, or we're under our own ordinance as well. Other than that, if you have any questions.
A few. I'm just going to work backwards through them.
Okay.
With animal control, is there any action that we as a committee need to take to work with Bo on that language, or are you going to speak with him about getting that updated and before the board?
What I'll do is I'll take our ordinance where it has it. I'll go ahead and yellow it out, or, make some changes. I can submit it to you guys. You guys can look at it. Basically, it's just going to be changing may, or shall to may. In a couple of the sections, it states in there that we shall have a place, and I'm just going to change it to may. So that way it gives the municipality an option if they have to or not. And of course, Bo will look at it to make sure that that is legally, able to do that. If he says that, no, we can't do that, we have to have shall stay in there, then that'll put a rush on things as far as trying to figure something else out. Like I said, at this point in time, we've exhausted pretty much most of our opportunities that we can do. We were trying to keep it somewhat in our general area, but at this point, we're just gonna have to look outsource and figure out somewhere else so we can have it.
Wasn't there supposed to be some money in Back the Badge that was gonna do like a Delta County or a more regional animal control shelter?
Yes, that was one of the plans. That is an idea, but of course, those take time to put together and get done. Hotchkiss is having the same problem we are with animals, and they don't have animal control either.
Right.
And I think that's why, and I can't speak for Delta County, but I think that's why they actually teamed up with the shelter in Delta, so that way they at least had some sort of a shelter or something. Unfortunately, we just have nothing out here in North Fork.
Yeah, that's just a long way to go for Delta. I mean, that'd be
Yeah.
a lot of time for,
Yeah.
you going
Yeah.
back and forth, and
And then we're gonna end up having to raise the fines to meet
Yeah,
those,
to charge for
those
that.
charges and everything else there. So
Right.
you're looking, if we end up having to take a dog to Delta, you're looking probably a $500 fine, at least, just because of having to go down there, having to pick them up. We would be the ones that have to pick them up, I believe. I don't know how it works, but that's what we were gonna agree with the other one. And then they would have to come to court all over a dog at large,
Right.
So
Yeah.
it makes it unrealistic to do something like that, in my opinion. But I mean, if we have a dog that's running around, generally, and it's worked out pretty well over this last year, is we'll take a picture of it, we'll post it on Facebook. He hangs out with us for a little bit, either in the PD or in our patrol cars. We'll drive around with him still. And then usually within a couple of hours, we'll get somebody that says, hey, I know that dog. And then we're able to return it to the house. So the tags is still a big thing. We still want to make sure that people are getting their tags. And I know that we left that undecided last time as well. So maybe we need to dive back into that and see how we can get more people out there to get their dogs tagged if we want to do anything, a discount or anything again. That way we can have some sort of a, hey, come get your guys' dogs done. We'll stay in here on a Saturday or a weekday or, a weekend and be all like, okay, we'll have an officer in here, come get some tags. We'll write you out your license, a weekend dog fair, tag fair or something, I don't know. Something to grab their attention to come get their dogs tagged is going to be the best thing.
Okay, so I think next steps on that is you'll bring the marked up ordinance for us to review, and we will add to our next agenda reviewing a plan to encourage tagging of animals that we can bring to the board and put into action hopefully fairly soon.
Okay.
Sound good? Okay. So working back from that, a little bit. For the municipal code, the updates, I will just strike that from our agenda until, let's say, maybe September,
Okay.
and then we'll revisit that.
Yeah, and if I get it done before that, of course, we'll let you guys know and give you guys copies and everything, so that way you guys can review it.
Okay. And then political signs, that sounds like that is completely finished. That is coming off our agenda for further consideration. There's nothing we could do with the owners or with our code to make any difference. So we'll just take that off, right? Okay. And then for the vehicle work, just a question on that. What's the typical life of your vehicles? I imagine it's, so, police vehicles, I imagine, get pretty good wear. So
They do. Generally, ultimately what I would like to do in a perfect world is to be able to buy a new vehicle every other year or every 2 years, and then kind of rotate them out. A lot of departments will rotate them out at 50 or 60,000 miles. Well, we don't need to do that because we don't put as much wear as some of those other bigger departments. Like Littleton, whenever I got this one, it had 60,000 or something, but they have a lot more wear. So I'm thinking if we can get on a set thing, I know I need to buy one more for next year to replace, or ask to buy one more for next year. And then after that, I think we're going to be good with, maybe every 2 years getting another replacement, and then putting one out to bid, or, just taking them and replacing them that way. The cars that we buy are used cars right now, the ones that we've gotten in the past. So I don't foresee us buying used cars anymore, unless we have to. What I would personally like to do is go through the gov bids like most departments, get them wired, get them plug and play in Denver. They send them down and then get them just completely done that way is what I would love to end up doing from now on.
Yeah, I would agree, because that's a lot of work on you that you put into this vehicle that,
It was what made sense. So whenever I had taken over 5 years ago, we had 2 F-150s that we had. So we ended up trading the F-150s to Public Works, and then we ended up buying the 2 GMC Terrains, and it was $30,000 for 2 cars rather than $55,000, $60,000 for 1 car. So while we were trying to re-up our stock and get everybody a newer vehicle, it made more sense for me to do it than try and buy something like that.
yeah, and we definitely appreciate it, but make your time to be better spent doing other things too. And
It's not bad sometimes. It's kind of fun. You kind of get to go out there. If you guys would like pictures, I could send pictures. I start by gutting them completely.
Yeah.
Seats, back seat, carpet. Everything comes out. Wires go in. I probably went through 2 rolls of black tape, couple 100 feet of power wire, ground wire.
Actually, it must be nice because then you can just forget about other things, and you're focusing on that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an escape too.
Yeah, and I would say the last 2 weeks, I would literally come in, check my emails, do my things in the morning, and I was at the shop by 9 o'clock. And I'd stay from 9 till at least 4:30,
Right.
just trying to get it all up, done, pointed. And that's, of course, if you don't have the little complications that you do. Our new camera systems that we have, I still have to read instructions on how to wire those, so had a little issue with those, had to go back and wire stuff. So so there is the little things that pop up that you don't know that pop up till the end.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate your plan to get on like a 2-year schedule. I think that's really forward thinking, and that's going to help a lot with maintenance costs and the board being able to take on those maintenance and vehicle purchase costs over time. So rather than potentially looking at 3 vehicles in 1 year because they all go at the same time, to space it out. So I appreciate that.
Awesome.
Yep. And then backing up again, the resource sharing with Hotchkiss. So the only comment I have on that, I'm glad it's working out really well. And it's been fairly minimal, but there's been some churning of the rumor mill about everything that's going on there. So I don't know if it would be appropriate to put out, for you or for us to put out a statement just reminding people that this is, you know, we have a contract with Hotchkiss regarding a deeper investigation into the situation. That's something that Hotchkiss is doing and not something that Paonia is going to comment on.
Yeah, and that's the thing is basically they asked us for help, and that's the only thing that we have any involvement in, is giving them a little bit of extra help.
I was gonna say maybe what we can do, so the town of Paonia and Hotchkiss did a joint public, just like, not a PSA, but just made a statement. So maybe we can, and we did that right at the beginning, so maybe what we could do is put that out and just republish that statement, which just says this is what we're doing. Yep.
And there was a,
I didn't either, yeah, I'll have to look. Okay. Yeah, so right now with that one, I do have our guys scheduled until the end of April, April now. I think what month it was. So basically what it does is I asked Dan, Marshall Miller, if we're still gonna continue, and he says, yep, so I just mark it up there. Feedback from our guys is very positive. Officer Hinyard's, yes, give me whatever you want. Basically all the officers are still on board, because it still allows them 2 days off, and it allows them a little bit of extra, funding for them as well. So they are still on board. I know that I probably potentially wouldn't want it to go way long, 6, 8 months, something like that. I think at that point in time, or it's the summertime, that would probably start getting them burnt out, and I don't want to burn my officers out, so that would be a big thing for me to keep an eye on.
Okay, then just to summarize that, we are going to, the staff will put out an announcement just again explaining the arrangement. From your perspective, Neil, you're just going to keep an eye on your officers, make sure everybody's still doing well, no burnout.
Yes.
And the contract will continue on a monthly basis, and you'll revisit that as needed if it seems like it's dragging on to the point that it's going to be an issue.
Yes.
Okay. On the trainings, jumping back up to that one, is there a good day or time that we should, I don't want to jump into your office randomly when you're doing other things to take a look at that, but if you have a good day or time when we could stop by and take a look, I think that'd be great.
You tell me what works for you, and I'll make it work.
Any preference?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, we can go in after your meeting here if you have a little bit of time. We can show you it, or show you the portal and everything that we're doing or that they're doing. So if you want to do that afterwards, I'm totally okay with that too.
Okay. That works for me if it works for you.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. Nick, do you have any other questions or anything on the public safety updates? Okay, and anything else that we need to know about?
No, I think we're good at this point in time. Like I said, everything's going pretty good. We're going to be getting geared up because it is spring. Our birds are back. So that spring is coming. We have our vultures in the back. They are back there now, so that spring is right around the corner. They come every spring and every fall. So as soon as you see the birds, you know that's whenever the weather is going to start changing. So we will end up start getting busier, unfortunately.
Okay.
I'm just thinking of the marijuana ordinance too. When that passes, you may get a little busier to begin with that as well.
Yes.
I'm thinking.
Yeah, we're probably, we're expecting that a little bit. One of our officers, Officer Patterson, our SRO, she actually was the marshal for Dinosaur. Um, when Dinosaur put in their original shop that they had, she did a lot of helping out with that, with the legal aspect of it
Oh,
and
great.
everything. So she has an idea somewhat of what needs to go on and everything, more than I have.
What
She
to
has
expect.
personal experience with it. So she'll probably end up heading up a lot of that during the summer and everything else.
Great.
The marijuana ordinance, and Catherine having experience with that already.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you, and let us know if there's anything else you need from us. You too.
This will be a good test. I think we've set it so that all of our microphones will be able to stay on at the same time. At least the three of us, maybe. Well, let's see what happens. Oh, okay, two. Hold on, let me go see one thing.
All right, that's
All right.
exciting.
Good.
Okay.
It won't do it for everyone. It's a max of 4, and so we're going to test it to see if it creates any kind of feedback or anything in the recording. That was the only concern that IT had. So.
Good.
Okay.
But it will allow 4 to stay on at a time instead of 1 or 2.
Well, I think that'll help a lot with keeping people mic'd.
I do too.
All right, so moving on, do you want to jump into the Board of Appeals ordinance? Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for getting that out this morning.
You're welcome.
But-
Yeah, I sent it as soon as I got it.
How do we want to go through this? Do you want to go page by page, or do you want to, do you have specific comments that you just want to put out? What feels like the best process?
Let's see, my only comment was, you know, in talking with some people, in the trades, they wanted to make sure that the people on the Board of Appeals, were knowledgeable people that know the code, and they will not make decisions on just feeling good or something. You know, it'll be based on code knowledge. You know, what's right, what you can do, what you can't do, and that sort of thing. So, if that makes sense.
So the direction that we had discussed on this, because what this was, so we have currently our zoning board of adjustments, and this
Right.
was then combining the zoning board of adjustments and board of appeals.
Yes.
And that the conversation then that was had also so that we could fill it was to open it up and refill the seats, even with the people that are currently seated, that they can reapply. And then that way the board would be able to review. And that would be some of the criteria that would be necessary, that they would have to be able to show their background, that they had
Yeah.
some experience or
Yeah.
knowledge,
Right, the
or
most
ability
important
to
one.
discern the code.
Right.
So our code does have some funny language in it that is a little bit odd. One easy one to talk about is lot coverage. There's a minimum percentage of, and the way that it's written makes people think that you have a requirement that you have to build out a certain percentage, but it's just the way that it's written. There's some oddities in there that definitely, when we start moving through that updated codification, we're going to want to clean
So
up.
it's interpretations then as
It
well?
is.
Yeah.
It is, it says 30% minimum coverage, but it's actually meaning that you have to have 30% open space. You can't build out more than 70% of your lot for fire, so that there's open space around your property for fire and
Gotcha.
things like that. So,
Yeah.
but the way it's, the verbiage literally says 30% minimum coverage, which then people say, so I have to build something that at least covers 30%? Well, no, but you have to really read deeper than looking at the table, and a lot of people just want to look at the table.
Right. Oh,
Um,
exactly.
I want to look at the table. It's a lot,
Yes.
it's easier, but you have to, when you get down into the language, then you realize, oh, it's 70% cover, you can cover up to, you're not required to cover any
Right.
percentage.
But no, exactly. That's what these people need to understand.
Right, right.
So I had a similar comment and a suggestion with that. You know, the IBC that we have adopted, and both the version we have now and the 2018 version has an appendix that specifically lays out what your Board of Appeals should look like. It's a non-binding appendix. It's something that we can choose to adopt or not. It's not considered, like, if we adopt the code, we have not automatically adopted the appendix. We have to call it out. And I don't think we should adopt it in full because I don't think it's realistic. They lay out shall very specifically, like, who should be on the board. And they say that the board shall include a registered design professional with certain experience, mechanical and plumbing expertise, things that I think it'd be great if we could get, but I don't know if it's realistic that we will.
Right.
So the way, I think it would be nice if that could be written into the ordinance, just to distinguish and say, you know, if the appendix conflicts with our ordinance, then the ordinance takes precedence. But where the appendix does not conflict with our ordinance, or where the ordinance is silent, we will do our best to meet the goals of the appendix. So basically that list of qualifications, I think the board should be looking at that and using that to make decisions on who should be on the board,
Right.
with the understanding that
We may
we're not gonna
get-
treat it as an absolute, because I really don't think
Yeah.
that those 5 professionals are going to be our board. I don't think
Right.
that's possible in our town.
Right.
I
Right, and
agree.
some of it, like you're saying, it doesn't necessarily fit either because the town doesn't do inspections on plumbing. We
Right.
do that through the state.
Yes.
Electrical, it's through the state. We do that. You have to show that you did it,
Mhm.
but you're just showing where you signed off, and we're able to pull up and look and see what properties had plumbing or electrical inspections, so we can track and see that it's been done. But other than that, we don't actually do those inspections, so, yeah.
Right.
Those kind of things that wouldn't fit shouldn't be applied, of course.
Right, but we have had community members bring it up that this appendix exists in the
Mhm.
IBC.
Right.
So
Oh,
I
yeah.
think being specific in the ordinance and at least calling it out and saying that, yes, we're aware of it,
Yes.
the
Right.
ordinance takes precedence, but we'll try to follow the appendix where we can.
Right.
Yep.
Well, we could do it as an attachment. I'll have Bo add it as a reference in the ordinance, and the attachment, and that it, will be followed to the best of
Right.
the town and board ability.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Super.
Nick, did you said you had one comment. Do you have any other comments or?
No, that's pretty much it. I think it's very good.
Okay,
I was happy with it. I thought he did a good
Yeah.
job.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I have a few other comments,
Mhm.
and they're all fairly small, but I'll run through them, and then I'll also send them to you in writing so that you
Okay.
can share that with Bo.
Okay.
On the first page, the whereas that references section 161510,
Yes.
to me that reads like it's saying the board has the authority to address anything related to town code. So we might want to make that more specific, since this section 161510 is zoning. So that would be enforcement of the town municipal code zoning section, I think.
So Bo did mention this specific whereas to me when he sent this over this morning. He gave me a call, and he said that the reason that he put that one in is because that's the upper part, and he's actually going to do an explanation of this. We were talking about this in reference to some of the feedback we got about the marijuana ordinance as well. And he said, I thought it would be incredibly helpful to do a written explanation of the formatting of an ordinance. And so the reason he told me, but I will tell him that if he can make it a little bit more defined, he is trying to be very clear on them, but was because that is the section of our municipal code that gives, that specifically gives the ability to create that zoning board of adjustment in the zoning code. But he said, yes, it goes zoning, but it's also building, and so they overlap each other, it's different sections of code. But yes, definitely, if you send it over, and when you send that over, I'll give it to him, and he may want to define it a little better. He's trying to be very aware of some of the feedback he's getting from community members about defining. But we thought that would be helpful too. So our intent is to have that in with in this next meeting when we're looking at the second read of the marijuana ordinance and things, just to have an explanation that says, the whereas isn't the actual law portion of an ordinance. It's the section that gives you that authority. So, a lot of those are the whereas, what of the state gives you the authority to create that. And then when you get into the meat, which is the legislative part, the second, now therefore let it be, that's where you then break it down and define it to our municipal law, not the state level. So I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks. All right, so I'm going to jump to page 2.
Okay.
And under the major heading A and then the smaller B, the purpose of the Board of Appeals, so on and so forth, it says that the zoning appeals shall be heard by the Zoning Board of Adjustment, which is accurate, that makes sense, but just that section reads to me a little strange since we're saying these are effectively a single board.
Right.
So I think realistically they're not going to have like now the Board of Appeals is a meeting and now the zoning is meeting. They're going to have one meeting.
Right.
So there might be another way just to phrase that it's a combined kind of a thing. And then there's some inconsistent language in the smaller subsection D below that. In the first line, it's called the Board of Appeals, and then in the third line, it's called the Board of Adjustment.
Right, and I think we wanted just to call them both the Board of Appeals. And so I will, we'll make sure that it's very clear and we call it one thing,
Yeah.
so it's not confusing.
And I really don't have a preference on what we call it, as long as it's consistent throughout. And then jumping to page 3, and again, I'm moving through this quickly, but I'll send it all to you in writing. And Mick, if you have any comments or changes, let me know. So subsection C on page 3, there's a section in there, it's about just over midway down that paragraph, that says the Board of Appeals shall not have the authority to interpret any administrative provisions. I just don't really understand what that means.
Okay.
I'm wondering if Bo could provide an example of what that would apply to,
Okay.
so that it's clear for the board, not the trustees, but the Board of Adjustment or the Board of Appeals, what their authority is.
Okay.
And where it stops there.
Okay.
And then under fees,
Yes.
it makes sense to me that there would be a fee for this process, but I wonder if we might consider refunding the fee to the applicant if the board finds in their favor. And what I'm imagining specifically is a case where an applicant comes to us to dispute what they consider an unfair building fee,
Right.
and then we're charging them a fee to even look at it.
Right.
And that's going to be a real hardship, I think, for people. So some way to, I don't know if we have to take the fee up front or if the fee could be assessed once the board makes their decision. That way, it's less of a hardship for people to bring something to the Board of Appeals if they expect that the board will find in their favor.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, actually, that was one thing. Reading through this, I was thinking the same thing, that we do not want to make it the fee that expensive. So, people, if they have a problem, then they're just getting fees on top of fees on top of fees.
Right.
So,
I like the idea of, or even if it's a percentage up front, a percentage after the fact, or something like that. I like the idea of, I actually like the idea of at findings. So at the finalization of the hearing, then you would be assessed the fees or for it. If it's not in your favor, if it is, then you're not assessed any fees. The only concern I have, of course, is then the collection of the fee after the fact, and that can be. It can be tricky sometimes. Some people don't want, especially if they don't agree, they don't want to pay, and so that would be.
but then they
the only
don't
thing.
get the building official to sign off on it,
That's true, right? Then your permit's not finalized, and
Yeah.
right.
We have that leverage as a town.
Yep. Okay.
And that's it. Those are the comments I had. Okay.
When you send those over, I'll get them back over to Bo. Our anticipation was to have this, any adjustments made to it, and then in front of the board at the 27th, the second meeting in April.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we can
that's
note
great.
there. All right, food truck ordinance.
Right.
And did you both see my email with that draft language?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
Any feedback or changes?
Look at it real quick again, real quick again.
I saw nothing. Oh, actually, yeah, I did have a comment. Should we require, some kind of form or something, to show that they have had they're up to date on shots or vaccines or that kind of thing? Are we allowed to do that to make sure that when they get their COVID shots, I mean, I know that's a kind of a slippery slope there, but
I don't know that we would be allowed to do that.
yeah.
Because you're not it's not a requirement that you receive any vaccination.
Right.
And while HIPAA's pretty specific in some situations, people don't have to share their
Yeah,
medical.
True.
And so I don't think that we could do
No, I
that.
agree.
Mhm.
That would not be.
I think it would be helpful if business owners want to
Yeah.
post that voluntarily.
Right.
But
Right.
I agree that particularly with HIPAA, I think we run into a HIPAA violation if we
Yeah.
called it
I
mandatory.
didn't think about that, but yes, definitely would.
No, I like it. I like the suggestion about the special events and public property, because that's a time when I think people should be able to participate and utilize the town area. And I think it's a good way to start walking into regulation. Like with anything, it's a start, and then maybe it grows from there.
Yeah, the one thing that I'm not sure about on that section is just putting it entirely at the board's discretion if we're going to limit public locations during special events, because I'm afraid we could run into concerns about favoritism or inconsistent application of our rules.
Right.
At the same time, I think we're kind of jumping the gun to get more specific than that right now.
Right.
I don't want to over legislate a problem that doesn't exist right now, if that makes sense.
Well, and I think it gives enough, it really is at discretion. I mean, it gives enough. So, of course, so you have a situation like, if it's a parade, of course, we're not gonna say you can set up a food truck on Grand Avenue during a parade, because it's a parade. So maybe for that event, your food trucks would be in the parking lot. We would allow, so yes, that street closure, they wouldn't be able to have a food truck. So I think that it makes sense to have it in there.
Okay. All right, good. Then if we're good with that, my thinking the next step on that is to bring this specific language to the board. Once the board approves the language, Bo can turn it into the ordinance with all the whereas. And,
Right.
So do you want this on the 13th meeting under your GAPS report?
Yeah, I think if it can be,
Okay.
I think this is more likely to grow as an issue this summer. So the sooner we can get something in place, so the community and the food truck owners know what they're looking at,
Okay.
the better, in my
We'll,
opinion.
we'll put it on there under GAPS for board feedback, and then we'll try to turn it around and potentially have it in a draft version for the second meeting in April as well. That may be a little quick, it may be first meeting in May, but we'll try.
Yeah, even the discussion we had at our last board meeting, use of the town park with, the farmer's markets. I thought that went very pushback, they really didn't want, but then I think they went and looked at
Mm-hmm.
the paved park, and it's a great place to put food trucks.
They
They
did.
stayed there.
They
Yeah.
did, and we came in and met afterward, and they actually were pretty happy with that area, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway,
Okay. So that'll be up for review on April 13th. So the other question I had related to that, Corinne, do you have the list of the people who attended that listening session, the food trucks listening session?
We do.
Is there any way for the people who provided contact information, would you be able to notify or get me the list, and I can send an email? I assume you're busy, very busy the rest of the week.
I'll
but,
actually, I'll have Amanda do it.
Oh, great.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if they could be notified that this is coming back for review, I think that would just be
Yeah.
a good way to reach out to the people that participated in
Yep.
the first session.
yeah, no, good point. That'll make them feel like their words were really listened to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else on food trucks?
So,
No. Okay. Then ADU ordinance, and this is really just a check-in. I don't know that there's anything else for GAPS to do, but I wanted to make sure that that's where we're at.
No, I have it slated. We have the planning meeting on the 16th, but that's the only thing we put on. That was Riverbank, because we're expecting that to be a pretty hefty conversation and community involvement. So our next planning commission meeting is, I'm waiting for confirmation of a quorum, but it's tentatively scheduled for the 30th of April. And it would be on that meeting before the planning commission. And once they finish their review and their recommendation, it'll come back to the board. Typically, they do that in one meeting, and so then it would be in the meeting in May.
Okay. One question I have on that is, I know there's been some discussion on the water moratorium and how that applies to ADUs, ADUs that may already exist illegally, or illegally may be too strong, out of
Mhm.
compliance with our current code, or people who have full plumbing to a building or a secondary unit that could be an ADU. And I think it would be really helpful for the board to get actual legal opinion on that before we're making a final decision. So I don't know if that would be an executive session with Bo, but I think we need to tread carefully there and make sure that we are not overstepping or falling out of line with the intent of the water moratorium in anything we approve, and that we're including any necessary legal language to make it clear that what the restrictions will be until and unless the water moratorium changes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
right. But I would think if the water line was already extended to the building before the moratorium, then it's kind of grandfathered in.
I think so. Again, this is where the clarification will be really good from Bo, an official legal opinion. But the issue is, it's not just the line, but it's the change of use. So say you have a water line to a garage that could be converted, or you could do an
Right.
addition on top of the garage, and it has a work sink in it, so you can wash up when you've been working on a vehicle, whatever you're doing outside. And now you're wanting to convert, because you already have the extension of your water line,
Right.
but it's to a shop sink, and now you're talking about turning it into a dwelling that's going to use substantially.
Right.
So then it's a change of use.
Yes.
For me, that's where it gets sticky by the intent of what the law was. Now, like you're saying, the ones that are operating now that are non-compliant, or they have that ability, but they're not using it that way, because it is not, it's not permitted, and they know it's not permitted. But they want to turn it from a mother-in-law suite to an accessory dwelling unit that may be a long-term rental or something like that. That's different. If it's not for me, it's
Yes.
that change of use is the trigger. Because we've had people go as far as saying, are you telling me I can't add a bathroom to my existing house because I'm extending my water line? Well, that's not the same. When you're upgrading your bathroom from a half bath to a full bath, that's not extending a water line and a change of use to what your dwelling is. And so I think that is, for me, change of use tends to be the trigger.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I definitely think we need that, a legal opinion, not just our
Absolutely.
opinions. Yeah, so,
Yeah.
okay.
And I know that it's getting into a tricky situation, but I would also, if Bo can include in his legal opinion, whether units that have been operating in a way that's not in line with our current code, even if it's not been enforced in any way, whether we should be looking at those as something to grandfather in, or whether in those cases, because they're out of line with code, that would also be considered a change in use at this
Right.
point. That's
Mhm.
tough, because, you know, they're
Yeah.
not using any more water than they have been.
Right.
But at the same time, then we're saying to people who have followed the code and who have potentially been waiting on this, you can't operate, but this person who's been operating out of line with code can.
Right.
And that hurts a little bit.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that we're being as fair as we can to everyone, while also following the intent of the water ordinance.
Right. Okay.
And
I
we
agree.
should be hearing pretty soon, the engineering
Yes.
reports, right?
Yes, they're finalizing, as far as, our communication, they're in line mid-April. We're gonna have those drafts start rolling in. So we'll review them at the staff level and the advisory water level, and then it'll come to the board.
That's kind of scary.
That they're
Good or
coming
bad,
in.
We need to know. Yeah.
Well, and honestly, I don't think any of us are going to be shocked by what it says. I think that the piece of information we're all looking for is, if there is a level we can sell, what level is that? But ultimately, I don't anticipate these studies are going to come back any different than the studies that they've been doing for the last 20+ years, which all say town has lots of water, town needs raw water storage. Because that's going to come back, I think it's going to come back to the raw water storage.
Right,
Mhm.
right, which we're
Yeah.
trying to work on.
Exactly, so.
Good.
All right, anything else with ADUs we need to talk about? I think we've kind of got our next steps there. On the next meeting, or no, on the next planning commission meeting on April 30th,
Yes,
Right.
and then back to the board in May,
yes,
with Bo working on a legal opinion
yes.
on
I
the
would,
tricky stuff.
I'm going to push to have a legal opinion, either the meeting prior or the same meeting that the ADU ordinance would come for review.
Okay.
So that before we start a big conversation, we don't want to start moving forward with conversation and then have to reel ourselves back. So
Yeah.
we'll try to get that opinion prior to.
That'd be
Mhm.
great.
Good.
And I mentioned the executive session. I don't know that it needs to be that. I guess either in writing or an executive session, whichever
Right.
Bo prefers.
Okay.
All right, so then short-term rental data. I'm actually really excited about our response. I don't know if you guys have gone in and looked at how many.
Jump in
I
your
haven't.
email, you know, yeah,
We're up to 133 people
That's
that have
great.
responded to the survey, and it's still going up. It's a little slower now than it was right at the beginning, which
Mhm.
you anticipated,
Right.
but we are still getting more responses. And I think, everything we have so far is preliminary, but so many people are interested in this topic. I don't think it would be out of line for us to say, hey, here's where we're at the next board meeting, and just give sort of a summary, without getting into a ton of detail because it might change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but letting them know how many are coming in and reminding people it's staying open.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do another, I'll do another update on Facebook, just to kind of bump it back up to the top and remind people, if they haven't done it, to definitely get on there and do that, and let them know, of course, they can. Have a couple in paper, but letting people know they can do a paper. The electronic seems to work a lot better, but,
And how long are we gonna keep this open for?
we kept it open until the 21st.
Yep, April
21st.
21st was, and
3 weeks, we gave 3 weeks.
Right.
Mhm.
And my main
Right.
thinking for that was a week after the water bills due, so that even the stragglers who get the notice on their water bill, if they're paying even a week late,
Right.
they bring it into town, they can pick up a survey, and we're still collecting a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. So for the paper copies, is there, would Amanda or somebody have the capacity to take those and convert them to, like, just go in and fill out the form using
Yeah.
that as a guide, and then retain the paper just in case?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay,
I'll have Amanda or Joanne, one of them can definitely help do that.
okay.
Mhm.
That way it's in the same electronic system and easier to navigate the data.
Yep.
So a couple things I wanted to share on that, if you guys haven't looked at it. Right now, we're split almost half and half on people who own businesses that do benefit and do not benefit from tourism. So I think we're getting a good mix of people's biases coming into it. I think that's important. And 20% of, 20% of the 37% of people who own a business in town and responded to the survey, 20% of those own a lodging business. So we're getting some of their feedback too. But the majority, 63% of our respondents so far are not business owners in town. They're just members of the community, and so that's where they're coming from. And I think that's helpful to know. 21% of the respondents don't have a short-term rental right now, but are considering it. So that's a pretty big number. Out of 133, that's potentially a lot of new rentals in town. Wow. So I think that kind of underscores how important it is for us to get in front of this.
Yes.
And so far, I'm hesitant to read too much into how people feel like the short-term rentals impact town until we get our full data set. But just looking at what's in so far, there's a really a pretty strong response that short-term rentals are bad for the long-term rental market, have a negative impact on that, but have a good impact on our local businesses. So I think my takeaway from that is that we need to find balance. That this is something that we probably shouldn't ban completely because it's good for the town in some ways, but something that we need to regulate because it's also having some negative impact.
Yeah.
And
That would be my thought immediately from what you said, was that, so it really is finding the balance so that we're still supporting the businesses, but we're supporting the people that have to live here as well.
Yep. And then as far as regulating, again, this is early data, but I'm seeing really strong support for a requirement to register. That's got the most support of any of the options for possible regulation. And then right now there's also moderate support for adding zoning restrictions, commercial building code requirements, paying commercial rates for town services, notifying neighbors, and having a maximum number of complaints. So I think those are things that we could consider incorporating into our regulations. It seems like people do support that. Of course, we do have people on both ends. We have some people who say we shouldn't be regulating at all.
Right.
Some people who say we should completely ban them.
Right.
Those
That was
are-
our first listening session.
Right.
Yeah, but those were mainly owners.
Right. But those are, both of the extremes right now are kind of a minority of the comments that have come in,
Yeah.
which I think is,
Yeah.
I think we're looking at probably a pretty good bell curve, and balanced regulations are going to serve us best. Interesting to me was that so far a majority of people say there is zero impact on safety and on parking. So I know as a board we've talked about parking as being kind of a big deal.
Right.
So far in the
Does not
responses,
occur to me.
not such a big deal.
Which kind of makes sense when you're thinking about it, because it's residential, and so it's a house that would have residential parking either on property or on street anyway, and typically it's a family, not large groups of people, descending on one piece of property. So it does make sense that you wouldn't really notice a significant increase in traffic.
Yeah, it's not Daytona Beach.
Right. Right. We don't have beach houses that are, you're putting, 5 families in one beach house. So, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great information.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be useful data. I think I don't want to jump too quickly into our next step until we let it play out and get our full data set after the survey closes. But I think something we could start looking at, a couple of things that we could start considering based on the feedback. And so, sorry, jumping ahead. One of our other questions was what would make it more appealing to convert to a long-term rental? And by far the best choice on that one, the favorite choice on that one, was financial incentives. So what that says to me is we could start just in a preliminary way, start looking into what kind of financial incentives we might consider for long-term rentals. And then since registration with a fee was something that people support. My thinking is whatever fee we collect from registering your short-term rentals would go into the pool for financial incentives for long-term rentals. Depending on, you know, what we're taking in and what we need, but just something to start considering and looking into what might make sense for the town.
There probably are no grants available for anything like that. I sure wouldn't think so.
I mean, that's a good question. There's certainly grants out there for affordable housing. Whether they would tie into short-term rental regulations, I'm not sure. But something to look at. And then the other big question is going to be, what can we actually enforce? What,
Right.
as a town, do we have the capacity to enforce? And I think that also needs to drive our decision of what regulations we're going to put in place, because to put it in the code is kind of meaningless if we can't do anything about it.
Right.
So we've still got some time, but my thinking for next steps for the committee on this would be, Mick, for you and I to do some research on what kind of financial incentives we might provide for landlords, what other towns are doing. Any examples of short-term rental ordinances that we really like, that we might be able to pull language from once we have our final set of regulations that we're going to work with. And affordable housing grants that might apply. I think that's a great idea. And then for Corinne, just what we can do.
Right.
Of all of the potential regulations we're looking at, which do you feel like the town and public safety could reasonably enforce?
Okay. All right.
You?
And under the commercial, especially when it comes to short-term rentals, the first thing that came to mind that I would look at and talk with Bo about as well is that with our commercial, we have the, so for enforcement for the backflow prevention device requirement. Basically enforcement is if you don't do it, if you don't comply, then our recourse is disconnecting your service. And so I would think that if a short-term rental was registering commercial, that maybe it would be some type of inclusion, the same kind of language. You know, they may receive a notice, a citation notice, but if they don't comply with the registration or whatever other requirements are in there, then the recourse would be that we just the disconnection of services.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Yep. We also have, this is kind of interesting to me, because in the regulations that we offered, there was some support, but not a lot for differentiating between owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied. At the same time, we have a lot of the comments that do specify that they feel that short-term rentals maybe should only be owner-occupied. So I think we're going to have to parse through that a little bit. And assess the data looking at both of those pieces. Because I think what my interpretation of that is the question on regulating a difference between the two. People didn't select that because they don't think you should have both in town. What they're suggesting is that we only allow owner-occupied in town. So just something else to look at. But yeah, so I think our next steps right now are to do that research, all three of us, and let the board know what feedback we've had. You'll put out again on social media just to bump it up again. And we'll revisit this at our next meeting once we have our final data set. All right.
Sounds good.
Any other comments, questions?
No, I'm actually just looking here for our next meeting.
All right. Look this small and grab my calendar.
And we wanted them on Wednesdays, right, again?
That works for me.
Works for me.
So what, is that May 5th?
We could do May 5th. That'd be the first Wednesday of the month.
5th
Sounds good to
at
me.
10 a.m. All right.
And then, you know, for the short-term rental survey, you both have full access to the responses and those charts and all of that if you want to take a look. We're still in the middle of it, so there's no requirement to jump in and start analyzing, but I just wanted to make sure you both know you do have access to it.